Tell us a little about yourself and where you're from and how did you get into politics?
Well, I moved here to Santa Barbara after college and got very much involved right away, actually, in the political scene. It was 1992. My passion is always in women's rights and reproductive health care. And so I had interned in college with the Planned Parenthood affiliate where I was and connected with the Planned Parenthood here and started volunteering and ended up actually working for State Assembly member Jack O'Connell when he was running for re-election.
Yes.
He was doing a voter registration drive in Ventura, and I got on the campaign staff that way and helped him win re-election on the campaign staff. And in the meantime, a position opened up at Planned Parenthood, and I started working there. So I was involved always. It was more in human resources, though. That was my profession that I got into. At the same time, I was always very much interested in the local political scene on issues, whether it be the state or local government, and got involved with the local Women's Political Committee, the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee. And what a great training ground, really, to know and to be active, to be aware, to be a part of the scene and the political world and different campaigns. So helped a lot of other people run for office. And then in 2003, city council seats were opening up. And long story short, decided to run for council back in 2003. And that's how I got into City Hall and been there ever since.
So your motivation was that you wanted to make a difference?
That's a big part of it. And I would go back and forth between there's a role for people who want to be from the outside making a difference in or from the inside making a difference working out.
I like that.
And I've been at both sides, been at both ends, and still do that actually when, even as an elected person for local government trying to move state or federal policy. Being involved and being active is very important. Civic engagement is a huge importance. I think it's a role that every voter should have. And Santa Barbara is amazing when it comes to civic engagement. I have to say, I think we're unique amongst many cities our size, and we're better because of it.
Why did you want to become mayor?
There was an aha moment. I think, I have a term cumulative effect, right? So you get involved in one thing, it leads to something else, it leads to something else, which eventually led to running for office. And when you're at that first step, you never would have thought 10 steps ahead where you'd go. But when Mayor Harriet Miller was in office, she encouraged me to apply, and I did, to become a member of the City Housing Authority Commission. And so that was my foray into local municipal government, especially as related to land use and affordable housing and being involved in human resources and trying to recruit and retain quality employees in a nonprofit and the high cost of living, all these things all interconnected. But there was one particular moment I was actually at a city council meeting as a commissioner, and the council at the time was updating its housing element. It's a state requirement about all the policies that need to happen as it relates to housing. And I had my 2 minutes, at the podium, and to explain to the council what I thought should be amended here, different wording there. And there was this aha moment where I really thought, you know what? I don't want to be telling them what to do. I want to be one of the people making the decision. And that was, it was really like a click. And the timing was good. There were some seats opening up. I knew that people on the council were being termed out, and it was the opportunity was knocking. So I thought, why not go for it?
Amazing. Your tenure as mayor runs out in 2017. We're not hurrying you out.
Still got a little bit of time left. That's right.
Are you planning for higher office, like former City Council member Das Williams? Now he's an assemblyman in Sacramento, or you're done with politics? What is your
That's
next
a great
move?
question. To be honest, I'm figuring that out. Term limits is a part of Santa Barbara local city hall scene, and I do like being in public office. I think there's a lot of value in it. I've met so many different groups and organizations and people doing great things. My favorite role in being in elected office is making that jigsaw puzzle become a nice, beautiful picture, and sometimes you need to know how to put all the pieces together. And being in this role, you get to connect people who never knew each other before. I'd like to somehow continue doing that in the future. I don't know what path that will take me in. I have a little time to figure that out.
You have a little
so
time.
I'm not ruling it out,
Yeah.
and it is something I'm thinking about. It also depends what other people do, and if who runs for what, and trying to weigh that out. So stay tuned. You know, I think that's to be continued. But
well, we'd love to have you in higher office.
Thank you.
You do such a wonderful job as a mayor, and it seems like you really care about the community and what you do, and we really appreciate that. Public service, people in public service are rare, the ones that do a good job.
Well, thank you.
So we really appreciate that. How do you feel about district elections? Were you for it?
Well, we had a settlement agreement, so what, it's almost irrelevant, my personal decisions on district elections, right? I mean, because either there was a process involved with a lawsuit in the state law. I'm certainly in favor of being compliant with state and federal law. Or there was an option of putting it on the ballot for the voters to decide. And long story short, we have a settlement, and part of the settlement is to actually have district elections starting this November. What was very important, I know, for the council and for me personally with the settlement were two major things. One was what the maps look like. As much as we need to work with the plaintiffs in this lawsuit, was creating their goal of two what's known as minority-majority districts, or majority-minority districts, but also the way, as much as we can, to have the general public be involved in creating the mapping. So there was, on February 28th, the first of 4 different workshops. There's another one March 18th, a council meeting March 24th, and then finally on March 30th, where the public can get involved and look online and actually give us their feedback on what the district map should look like. And that was very important to us, as opposed to having gone through a trial and have a judge actually, put a map together without any kind of public input whatsoever. So as much as we can have that dialogue, it's a very quick process. I know normally the Santa Barbara way, it would take a long time, but I think under the circumstances, that was the maximizing community input as much as we can. The second thing was, and this we're seeing in cities all over the state, is that when this issue of district elections come up in a legal setting, if you do a trial and you lose in trial, the city pays attorney's fees. And we were seeing city after city paying upwards of $3 to $4 million in attorney's fees to get to district elections. And we thought that would not be the best use of public money. We saw that was where the trajectory was going in terms of district elections, and really thought it's $600,000 we still have to pay, but that is a far cry from $3.5 to $4 million. And I thought that was really important to us too. This is going to change how people choose who serves on the city council. The mayor seat will stay at large, and then there'll be 6 different council seats. And most likely this November, it will be areas around the east side of town, the west side of town, and then most likely the area around the Mesa will be up for re-election, because Councilmember Rouse, his term is up. So it makes logical sense that we should look to that area as one of the 3 seats. And then in 2017, then the other 3 areas would go up for election. Another thing that is coming up a lot, is the question of whether the city should move to even year elections. And I think that's a dialogue that the council needs to have. I personally was not, without getting into details about the litigation process, that really wasn't on the table as part of having a judge mandate that, even though that has happened in other cities. However, I do think that the voters do have the right and the capability and the, to make that decision. And so those details we still need to work out. If, put it on the ballot, do you put it on this year? Do you put it on next year? What does that look like? I think that's a conversation well worth having.
So it's a gradual process.
Yeah, and I think for me it was also very important that the charter, there's lots of things in the charter that the voters have decided on. How many council seats do you have? What did the council get paid? What do you do about term limits? What do you do about odd year or even year elections? And to me, as much as we can have the general public, the actual voters, make those determinations and have that public dialogue, it was important, as opposed to just going through a court process. So we had we had litigation with district elections, and we kept that to the issue at hand. And I think those other concerns that have legitimately been brought up about voter turnout and participation, all those issues need to be discussed some more once the settlement is, put to bed.
What is your take? Do you believe the pros and cons of district elections, do you believe it benefits the city?
I don't know. I tend to think that we're a little too small for district elections. For big cities, I totally understand it, but we're a little around 90,000. So you have 15,000 voters, not just voters, you have 15,000 residents per district area. And that, really brings it down to just a few thousand people who are going to pick one of 6 council members who vote on the issues related to the entire city.
Right.
I understand and appreciate the connectivity with neighborhoods and wanting to have a connection to someone who's accountable to that particular neighborhood. I also understand that the 5 other council members are going to be voting on things in each neighborhood, whether or not the people in that neighborhood voted for that person because they might have been in a different part of the city.
Right.
So those are all questions that honestly I think we're going to have to see how that plays out. City of Santa Barbara has gone back and forth between district elections and at-large elections for as long as city has been the city
Right.
since 1850, right?
The argument been going on.
So it's a change. I think it's happening throughout the state. I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years from now most cities are going to move to districts, and we'll just be on the sooner end, the front end of that. I do hope it brings up neighborhood issues in the bigger context of citywide concerns. That was part of the arguments, and it's a legitimate issue.
Yes.
And certainly something I think we've all on the council care about different parts of the city. We'll see how having a district member of a council, how much that's going to weigh into when different projects come up throughout the city, and how does that work? Because you still have to convince at least 3 or 4 other people to work with you and vote with you on things, even if it's something in your own district.
So do you think, like you said, Santa Barbara is a small community, so you think it'll create more friction? Will it give us better services?
That's the question, because there are things like water and environmental trash, just general planning, density of housing, so they're big city issues, the budget, how many police officers do you want, where do how the fire stations get stationed, and what kind of equipment do we have for public works. Those are big citywide issues that all 7 are going to have to work on. And then there are going to be projects throughout the city that's going to reside in a particular spot. And the question will be, let's say there's a project in my neighborhood on the west side. Let's say Foodland. I'm making this up. This isn't a true project. I'm making it up. But let's say that commercial area, there's a new project about a mixed use, there's a mixed use project, let's say there at the commercial in San Andres and Mitchell Terrena. There's one council member who represents that area, and then the mayor represents the whole city. You still need at least 2 more council members to participate in that, but yet they're not accountable to the voters in that area. So how much can that one district council member persuade and work with their colleagues on whatever the issues may be about the project? That I don't know the answer to, and it'll be really interesting to see how that unfolds over time.
Some of the proponents that took the case to court said they didn't felt they were represented in their specific neighborhood.
Yeah.
What do you feel about that?
I think in the past that might have been the case in certain areas of the city, but I have to say this particular council, and since I've been mayor for sure, and maybe a little bit even more on the city council, we've been really putting in a lot of money and time and energy into areas other than downtown. An example, on the east side, we had $9 million of grant money, and we're matching some of that to some major safety improvements on the east side. That's on top of, I think the east side, for example, has had more infrastructure improvements and funding in the last 5 to 6 years than any other place in the city. That's not, but I think part of that had to do with they needed a lot of improvements. So I think with the redevelopment agency, when that was in place, there was a lot of capital projects, and it could only be within that district. There were boundaries, and so some parts of the city didn't get any redevelopment agency money, so you didn't see any activity going on. And I think that led to this idea that we only cared about downtown, when in fact that's where the capital money came from, only for that area and for the waterfront. Now that that's gone, We have a little more, we have less money right now to deal with infrastructure, but the palette is bigger. The Mesa is another great example of another neighborhood between the undergrounding of the utility poles, making Route 225 now a city street instead of a state highway, which is what it was. Yes. Through a residential neighborhood, lots of things going on the Mesa, and all the different sidewalk replacements and things. I think there's really a real key emphasis that's been placed in areas that maybe a decade ago was not necessarily the case.
So you feel like this city council is fair in terms of the whole city, in terms of how they function and the things they deliver to the people?
I think that's been the intent of the council. I think if you look at our budget, to me, you look at how a council spends its money, that's where its priorities are, that's where its values are. When you put money into, for example, when we came out of the recession, one of the first things our council did was reopen the East Side Library on Mondays. It was closed Mondays due to the recession. That was important to us in that neighborhood. We're putting in a police community center at the Franklin Center. We've done murals. Our funded Arts Alliance groups to do murals in the area, the cleanups in the area. So I really think we put a big emphasis on it, but it's all perception too. So the real issue is going to be, once there's now going to be people who only represent one area, are they going to be able to convince 5 other council members and the mayor to say, my neighborhood is the one you should put the money in, not yours? And how is that going to work? And I frankly just don't know how that's going to. But I will say the council members will have their messaging will be different, because who they're accountable to in terms of voting will be one area as opposed to the other. I think another thing that's changed in the last couple of years is we now have this neighborhood advisory council. We used to have these advisory councils for the Lower West Side, the West Side, and the East Side, and they were kind of like the stepchildren of the boards and commissions. They were very committed people involved, but they didn't really get the same kind of attention than, for example, the Parks and Recreation Commission. Now we have this neighborhood advisory council that focuses on underrepresented areas of the city, and they actually recommend what capital improvements we should focus on. We do get state, federal funding for capital improvements for certain areas of the city, like the East Side and the West Side and the Lower West Side. And that community committee actually goes through and helps the city prioritize what bus stops, sidewalk repair, curb cuts, for people who use strollers or just to have more universal access, upgrading the kitchen at the Franklin Center. You name it, those kind of things. And that's really been a great improvement. And that was just a new structure that we put together, knowing that focusing on neighborhoods was very crucial.
Amazing. The city built the desalination plant several years ago. We never used it. We're back in the drought cycle again. Why did we shut it down?
Yeah, we did use it for maybe a few days or a month. Okay. Actually, in my office, have a bottle of desalination water. You don't want to drink it. It's 25 years old. It looks a little yellow.
Yeah.
But it's there. What happened was the voters in 1991, in the height of the last huge drought, and it was a big deal, they voted in both state water and the desal plant. It took almost a year to build the desal plant, and then what's known as the March miracle happened, and it rained so much that Lake Cachuma spilled. It's very expensive to create potable water from from the ocean. The process
it's not
is very
so
expensive.
automatic like people think.
So it wasn't necessary anymore because we had the capacity through Lake Cachuma. So that was the part of the reason why to decommission, to mothball is what we've been calling it. We've kept the permits active throughout the entire time, throughout the 20-year period, and the city sold off the membranes and the filters way back when, because they were going to degrade anyway, and there was still value in them, and people, companies in Saudi Arabia actually bought them. The money we got from selling it way back then actually helped us today purchase other water that we can have now. So actually it's worked out. People ask, well, why'd you sell this stuff? If we had waited to sell it now, it wouldn't have been worth anything.
Wouldn't have any value.
So we had that money. So we still have the area of where the desal plant is. It's going to be very expensive to bring back online. It's going to be
What are we talking about?
$35 million is the ballpark. We're waiting to get the bids back from those who are working on those details. So it's a big deal. However, even with our residents who are doing amazingly well in conserving water, they have conserved more than 20% of their water use this last year. Even continuing that, if the drought stays the way we think it is into the next year, by 2017, we'll need our desal plant for 40% of our water supply.
Oh.
It's a lot of water.
Yeah,
so, and you know, so that's a drought response plan, and that has been in our water supply management plan for a very long time. We just updated it back in 2010. The bigger question, I think, is this drought one day will be over, and then there'll be another drought. I mean, that's just the cycle. And so what's the long-term policy about desalination, not only for the city of Santa Barbara, but for the whole region? We're all in one area. There's permitting issues to deal with that. There's environmental concerns to deal with that. There's energy issues. I mean, I think all those conversations need to happen. It's been a challenge, but we actually are very fortunate that we have both the desal plant as an option, as a very last resort, a very last resort. But even state water has been questioned. People say, well, we don't have the state water when we need it. So, well, if we didn't have if we said no to state water, we wouldn't have had the distribution system coming to us. And because we have the distribution system, we've been able to purchase water from elsewhere that came to us that we've been able to use. So it's complicated, it's expensive, but we need the water.
We do.
Yep.
Our city council consists of 5 men and 2 women. Since 50% of the population are women, how do we get more women to be involved in politics, like you?
Well, you asked, your first question with me was how I got involved in politics, and it had to do with women's rights issues, and certainly being involved and being active and wanting to raise the opportunities for women to run is very important. And Santa Barbara actually, comparatively, in other parts of the state or country, are doing amazingly well.
Has done well. We've had 4 women mayors.
We have, and you know, our state assembly member at one point, Hannah Beth Jackson, and she's now state senator, our congresswoman, prior mayor, you said, our supervisors. I mean, we do, and school board members. So, however, you know, like I said, it's a big decision to run, and there are 2 issues. One's a time issue and time management issue. Being able to, if you're raising a family or have bills to pay, are you able to afford it? There's also, campaigns are not fun. I mean, they're fun to a certain extent in terms of exciting, but campaigns especially has just become, unfortunately, very negative in a lot of ways. And I think that competitive, nasty behavior that can sometimes happen turn a lot of people off, men and women.
Yes.
The more we can put a positive role on campaigning, the better. I think the best way to get more women to run is for more women just to say, I'm going to do it. They don't need, and not to feel like they need to be asked permission. If they want to run, they should go for it. You know, and I think that has been something that slowly is happening more and more. As you see more and more women in leadership roles, I think certainly girls, I go to elementary schools or high schools, and just by being a woman and mayor, I think that helps the next generation know what's possible.
You're a role model.
You know, I mean, I think, you know, having Hillary Clinton even run for president back in 2008 and having Barack Obama win, I mean, you know, just opened up opportunities that you just never saw before. And I think that over time, I think will make a big difference. But, you know, be the change you want to see, I guess.
Be the change you want to see.
That's right.
Well, I want to thank you for coming and spending some time. I learned a lot, and I bet our audience did. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate what you do for our city. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. It's great to be here.